Hello my friends, welcome to my corner. Really quick intro because the video is way too long if you ask me already, so I just wanted to say two things. The first one is I simply wanted to send out 5,000 and counting thank yous. You know why. I am just so honored and so happy, and I wanted to say if you know anybody who might be interested in the topics that we usually discuss here at Jorge's Corner, just please, let your friends know so that we can get more conversations started on books, movies, music, love, everything that we talk about here. The other thing that I wanted to say is that I want to see if there's interest in a Q&A. You know, these things that are customarily done when channels reach a certain number of subscribers. So if you're interested in that, please drop your questions in the comments section and I will see what I can answer. Okay, so please feel free to ask about any of the, once again, topics that we usually talk about here, or just any kind of question that you're having, and I'll definitely see what I can do. So let's look at this bookshelf. Okay, once again, it's been a while, it's been way too long. I have shown you this one right here before, then we did this one, and today we're gonna do this one right here with the interesting collection of books that you can see there. So as I said, I wanted to keep this brief, and that's it. Okay, I'll just let you focus on the books. So I hope you enjoy it. So here it is, my friends, the moment we have all been waiting for. This is in fact a very special shelf that I'm about to show you because, as you can see, it houses a kind of a collection, and I'm going to tell you what this is all about. But first, let's get this stuff up here out of the way that we usually do it, and then we'll get to the other books. And remember, as usual, there are books behind the ones that you can see right here. So I have this little book, novella really, Paranoia in the Laundrette by Bruce Robinson. Bruce Robinson is an actor also and a film director. He directed the film Withnail and I, which is really a really good film that I recommend to you. He also wrote the screenplay for that. He wrote the screenplay for The Killing Fields. I don't know if you have had the chance to watch that movie, but I highly recommend it. And this little book is really quite an enjoyable read. I found it at Half Price Books for a few I think a few cents, really. It cost me like 50 cents or something like that, but the original price was £2.99. So really interesting read. I may share it with you because I do have a review of it that I wrote many years ago that I could maybe turn into a video if anybody's interested. I have this book on history from these series of Insight books. I have also one on Kafka that I think I've shown in one of my what do you call it? Not the bookshelf tour, but the book haul. So yeah, and I honestly haven't not read this, so that is somewhere there in my future. And then of course I have a copy of the original Winnie the Pooh. I'm a big fan of this character and all the other characters in the series, so I really enjoyed reading this book after I had seen so many of the cartoons. So that is also there. I have some movies as usual. Here you have the classic Pan's Labyrinth. If you have not seen this, try to do something about that. It's a movie that you have to see, at least if it's only to say that you did not like it. But I think it's a very good film. It really deserves at least much of the hype that is around it. So Pan's Labyrinth is right there. I also have, which a film that I really want to rewatch one of these days, because it's been quite a while since the first and the last and the only time that I have seen it. This is the Soviet version of Hamlet with Innokenty Smoktunovsky. So it was directed by Grigori Kozintsev, and it's really one of my favorite adaptations of Hamlet. Okay, so I think this is fantastic, and I do want to watch it again. The same film director did also an adaptation of King Lear, and believe it or not, he also made a film about Don Quixote. So I have seen them, but I don't have access to them at this point. But I do have a copy of Hamlet that I plan to rewatch one of these days. And then here you can see, a more mainstream kind of thing from my usual fare, kind of a double feature of Argo and The Town. I think I enjoyed The Town more than I did Argo, but I do remember that I bought this DVD. I was just going through a breakup many years ago, so you know how it is sometimes with these things, these books, these movies, these CDs or albums as objects that we associate them with certain things that were going on. in our lives at that point. So what you see right here, I was telling you about this before, this is a Nobel Prize collection from the publisher Aguilar. This is a publishing house that unfortunately doesn't exist anymore, but in the Spanish-speaking world this was huge, okay, because they would put together editions of the complete works of certain authors. And what you are seeing here, as I said before, is the Nobel Prize collection. Part of it, of course. I do not have all the books in the collection, but I do have many more than the ones that you're seeing here. I wish I were more organized and I had like an entire shelf devoted just to this collection, but the fact is that I am not, and you're gonna see in future bookshelf tours from me that I do have more books from this collection in different places. Some of them may be actually there in the back, so I guess we shall see, because I have no idea what we're going to find in the back. Hence the color here, right? The yellow and blue combination for the Nobel Prize. And the ones that I have here, they all look like this. These are kind of old, I'm going to show you a couple of them just so that you can see. So I have here Johannes Jensen, the Nobel Prize from 1944. This is Frans Sillanpää from Finland. And I'm going to just tell you what the others are about, and then I'll show you what one of these volumes looks like inside. The good thing about these was that they had plenty of works by each one of these authors. So for example, if you are in the English speaking world and you want to read something by Henrik Pontoppidan, there are not many options, honestly. So one volume of these would actually include many. Let me see if I can, I'm kind of juggling here the camera and showing you. So all of them came with a portrait of the author and introductions. Sometimes you had like a little study on them. And here is the list of all the works that are included. I don't know if you will be able to read that. Let me see if, as usual, if the camera cooperates with me. Maybe if we can get like a little bit of a, yeah, we can see a little bit there. So many titles, right? Including The Promised Land. Interestingly, Lucky Pair, which is the movie, the book that I told you about in one of the videos, is not included in this volume. So that is kind of a very strange thing, but many others are. So that's why many of the Nobel Prize winners that I was able to read, I primarily found them in this collection. In English, sometimes there were maybe one book available by them, and it was long out of print and very expensive. So this helped me a lot too. I'm really happy about this one. These two, for example, are the complete works of Martin du Gard. So, oh, by the way, you also got like an image of the Nobel Prize medal. And the reason why I like this one is because sometimes this happens, not always, because these are really old books. You can see once again that you have a portrait of the author right here. But sometimes, if the previous owner had been, fastidious about things, they had even kept the little, the words are not coming to me in English today for some reason, the bookmark, okay? So you can see this one right here for the first volume of his complete works. Not all of these are, by the way, the complete works of the author. In some cases, they decided to do that. For example, in this one. So we have the ones that I told you before. I have here Ivan Bunin. I think for this one I also have the bookmark. See, yes, I do. So there you can see it. You have the bookmark, usually having something to do with the culture or the works that were included. And once again, the portrait of the author. So that is Ivan Bunin. Carl Spitteler, then Henrik Pontoppidan, Verner von Heidenstam, Grazia de Leda, and Paul Heise. These are the ones that you can see. And then this one right here is also from the publisher Aguilar, but it's a different collection. He was also a Nobel Prize winner and actually one of my favorite Spanish poets. I am talking about, this is really interesting. I have they have like a little Shakespearean sticker right there, right before the cover from the previous owner. But this author, Vicente Alexandre, he won the Nobel Prize in Literature, as you may know. These are also obras completas, though I think at the time this was published, Alexandre had not published all of his works. So he published 3 books, I believe, after this one that are not included here as a result. But it may have been published before he won the Nobel Prize, and that is why the cover looks different, and there's a little bit of a difference there with the style in which the book was published. And by the way, these that I'm showing you in the yellow and blue kind of thing, there's also another type of binding that is green that you're sometimes going to find in the Nobel Prize collection. So it's not like all of them look exactly the same. I'm moving a little bit here. So I have this really nice copy from Oxford of the Confessions of St. Augustine. I really like it, even though the font is kind of small. But I don't know, I really liked the translation. This is the edition of the Confessions that I actually underlined. So I don't know why I'm drawn to this translation, but it really spoke to me. I have also read the one that was published by Penguin, and it was also very enjoyable. And here I have a little movie that I bought a long time ago, one of my favorites ever, The Enigma of Caspar Hauser. I really like this movie by Werner Herzog. So I do need to watch this again, because it has also been a while since the last time. Next to the book by Alexandre, I have the classic Oxford book of Japanese short stories. This is a really, really good collection if you want to start reading the masters of Japanese literature, but in the form of the short story and in that type of vein. So let me read to you some of the authors that you're going to find here. You have, and once again, I'm not sure you'll be able to read the titles there, but Moriogai, Soseki, we have Higuchi Ichiyo, Shiga Naoya, Tanisaki Junichiro, of course, and it goes up to I think the 20th century, I would say. I'll tell you which is the who is the last author included. Of course, you have Kawabata and Miyazawa, Akutagawa, of course, Dasai, of course, Endo, Abe, Mishima, and so many big names right here. The last author included is Banana Yoshimoto, so you have an idea. And of course Murakami is included there too. And one good thing about this is that it includes prize stock, also known as The Catch by Kensaburo Oe. Great novella. So once again, if you want an introduction to the great authors of Japanese literature, this is a very good way. It's a very good place to start. This that you see right here, this blue book, is also a Nobel Prize collection in Spanish, also just like the Aguilar collection. This was published by a publisher called Hispamerica in Latin America, and the same books, exactly the same, but by a different publisher called Orbis in Spain. And this is Quo Vadis, of course, by Sienkiewicz. And I read this edition. I remember I was reading this when I went to Singapore a few years ago, many years ago. So this was my companion during that trip to Singapore. This is a great novel that I hope to tell you about in the future, because it's really one of the best historical novels that I have read. And this is coming from somebody who does not particularly like historical novels. I am not naturally drawn to historical novels, but I really enjoyed this one. So I'm going to switch to the other side of the camera here, and while I do that, I am going to let my cat out of the room, because I had no idea that she was here. One of the 4 cats that I have, actually. So I'm going to do that because it's not a good idea to have the cats here. My cats kind of have that tendency to start making strange cat-like noises every now and then, and you may not want to hear that. So there you go, my friend. She's out of the room right now, so we can have some quiet here. Okay, relatively. Okay, so let's continue. This is the whole thing. So I told you about Sienkiewicz. Then I have these 2 books, and this would make up the complete poetry of Saint John Perse. Okay, another winner of the Nobel Prize in Literature. I guess this is kind of like the Nobel Prize shelf right here. I guess we could say that. So this is the collected poems. It includes the major ones. And then there was another volume. These were by, let me see. So it's published by Princeton, okay? So there were a couple of poems that he published afterwards, and they included them here. Let me show you this one just so that you can see what it looks like, the collected poems. And the beautiful thing about these 2 that I have just shown you is that they are bilingual editions. This one comes with a kind of portrait of Saint John Perse done with ink, very well done. There are also that you may be aware of some commemorative editions of classics of literature in Spanish. The first one that they published was Don Quixote, I believe. The second one was Cien Años de Soledad, 100 Years of Solitude, but don't take my word on that, published by Alfaguara. And this is La Ciudad y los Perros by Mario Vargas Llosa. Yes, that's my Argentine accent right there. This was translated into English as The Time of the Hero. So not the city and the dogs. For some reason they thought that would not make a very good title. So this was published at the 50th anniversary of that novel. It's Mario Vargas Llosa's first novel, and it already gives you a very clear idea of why he is such a successful author. He is just an excellent narrator. Okay, whatever else you may think about him, he knows how to tell a story, and that is just a very rare quality, believe it or not. I mean, you know how it is. Sometimes there are good writers who are not necessarily good storytellers, and vice versa. So Mario Vargas Llosa, I think, is a very good writer and a very good storyteller. So very well deserved Nobel Prize, if you ask me. And here I have something that I bought at Half Price Books, as you can tell, still by the price sticker there. Performance, one of my favorite movies. This whole idea of the doppelganger and all that stuff. I mean, you can see it here, and Mick Jagger is in it. Great film. Okay, so another film that I recommend to you if you haven't seen it already. Next to Vargas Llosa, we have a volume of very short stories by Soshchenko, The Galosh and Other Stories. These are stories about life in the Soviet Union in a kind of a satirical vein. So he doesn't get a lot of attention as an author, but I think he is great. And you know, many of these books, if not all, because I'm only human, you can expect me to tell you a little bit about sometime in the future. You know, it may happen soon, it may happen years from now, who knows, right? But that is definitely my intention. This was the first novel that I read by Modiano, whom I have called in the past my favorite French author. At least at the point that I said that, I believed it. So, and I think he is. He will always be one of my favorites. Missing Person. And I did not read exactly this copy, but it was one that I found at the library, I believe. But when I, you know, as soon as he won the Nobel Prize, I went out and tried to get a book by him. And I believe this was the first one that I was actually able to buy. And then right here, right next to him, I have my little Yoko Ogawa collection. I have not, you're not going to believe this, but I have not read her what's her famous novel that that so many people read. I want to say The Memory Police or something like that. Please forgive me if the title is not correct, but I read these books by her, and then after that, for some weird reason, I never read her again. But I absolutely love The Housekeeper and the Professor, another book that I would like to tell you about. The novellas included in the diving pool. Also, Hotel Iris is very good, and the interconnected tales that you find in Revenge. So definitely one of my favorite Japanese authors of all time. This book has also been very influential for me, To Have or to Be. It was recommended to me by a friend of a friend, somebody I met in Buenos Aires who's unfortunately no longer with us. A guy who knew a lot about philosophy. He was that kind of person that, you know, would hang out at a cafe all the time, and people just went there to talk to him. And he recommended this book to me. So To Have or to Be, along with The Art of Loving and Escape from Freedom, all of these by Erich Fromm. I absolutely love these books, and they were, you know, tremendously influential and a big help in my life. Right next to that, I have a collection of the complete Father Brown stories by, of course, G.K. Chesterton, that I bought at the Chesterton conference many years ago also. I have not read all of them, but I'm kind of working on it, so we'll see how that goes. Let me see if I can move a little bit more, just right there. This book, you're not seeing it on purpose, because that is a surprise. This is something that I want to tell you about, hopefully, you know, in the recent future. I know that I have, you know, promised many things, and I have shown you many books that I said, oh, I'm going to talk about it, and then, you know, who knows when that is going to happen. But when it happens, I'll tell you. Okay, this is the book that I showed you and that bookshelf tour. And then some books, quite a few of them by Chesterton. So all of these are from Dover publishers, which are, you know, those are like affordable editions. So I have The Flying Inn, which I haven't read at this point. It's kind of on my list. I have read Man Alive. So this is a great novel by him. One of the first, I believe, and very, very brief. A collection of essays titled Heretics. This is a companion piece to Orthodoxy. So if you're into Chesterton, definitely check this one out, because it's really in very close dialogue with that great, great classic that is Orthodoxy. Another one I have not read, The Paradoxes of Mr. Pond. I believe this was kind of a late collection of also sort of detective stories, but not Father Brown stories. So if for whatever reason you do not like Father Brown, that is an option probably if you still want to read detective stories by Chesterton. I also have The Ball and the Cross. I have read this, but it's been quite a while, and with many of these books that is really the case, as it is with The Napoleon of Notting Hill. This is a novel that is set in the future, and it is set in the year 1984. So some people speculate that maybe George Orwell was making a reference or you know, had read this novel. It's a possibility. So we do not know for sure, I believe, but that is something there that we can consider. And then I have a collection also of interrelated stories that could also be read as a novel, The Club of Queer Traits. This one is a lot of fun. Okay, so if you like to laugh, I mean, I would say read anything by Chesterton, of course, but this one is really quite funny in particular. I have a collection of French short stories, and you can see some of the authors who are included right there. This is a dual language book, of course, as it says in the cover. Or on the cover. I always have trouble with that. You know, prepositions kill you when you're trying to learn a different language. It's like, especially, you know, when you come from Spanish into English, but, you know, people who know me are already used to that. This book was given to me as a gift by a classmate of mine. I believe she was auditing the class. It was a class on Dante that I took when I was in college. And she gave me this book, and it just so happened that one of the professors was teaching a course on, I believe it was 17th century, no, hold on, that's a different one. Well, it was on French literature. It was an introduction to French short stories and poems, and we used this book. The same professor was going to teach a course on 17th century French literature, but he passed away that summer. It was like really, really heartbreaking. And before that, he had taught a course on Proust for 3 semesters. So they read the entire In Search of Lost Time, if you can believe that. So a lot more to come about Proust. That I can tell you is going to be soon. So I really enjoyed this. Let me see if I can tell you some of the stories that you're going to find here. So you have The Atheist's Mass by Balzac, The Legend of Saint Julian the Hospitaller by Flaubert, then some texts by Baudelaire, Minuet by Maupassant, and then Death of Judas by Paul Claudel, The Return of the Prodigal Son by André Gide. I really like that one. Grand Lebrun by François Mauriac. And then we have something by, let's see, The Passer Through Walls. That was a good one. That was one that I actually do remember, by Marcel Aimé. Really good one. And then The Guest, of course, by Albert Camus. A really, really good short story. And in that class, we also used this book as the companion piece to the French poetry section of the course. So I see that my battery is about to run out, so I have shown you the books that you can see on this shelf, but there are books behind it, so we're going to see what we find there. Just let me charge the battery and we'll look at that. This part will not take very long because many of the books that I have here, I have just noticed, you have already seen. In particular in the video that I did on the author spotlight for Julio Cortázar. So you can see already one of them right here. So let's see what we have. I have more of that blue Nobel Prize collection right here. So this one that you can see here is Poemas y Pensamientos, so Poems and Thoughts by Sully Prudhomme, the first winner of the Nobel Prize in Literature in the year 1901, who unfortunately very, very few people read anymore. And this was a really, really nice collection, not very long, as you can see. I also have one here by Władysław Reymont. This one has a couple of stories, maybe, I'm just hoping that this doesn't fall. Maybe one of these could be considered to be a novella. So you have Justice and the how would I translate condenado? As I told you before, the words are not coming to me in English right now. So the prisoner number 437. That could be a way to translate that. I have a volume of poems by Karlfeldt. He was the only winner of the Nobel Prize in Literature who received it posthumously, and I believe he had rejected it before. So he was, in a way, you could say, forced to receive the prize. And this is Flora and Pomona and other poems. And then finally I have this really nice little volume. All of these are just about the same length, by Nelly Sachs. So in the realms of death and some poems. This one was really nice too. That's the Nobel Prize collection, and by the way, I have more of those all over the place too. The one that I showed you for Quo Vadis was also from the same collection. This is a huge novel by the Argentine author Eduardo Machea, La Bahía del Silencio, or La Bahía de Silencio, the Bay of Silence. I have shown you this before too in that video that I did on Argentine literature. Of course, you're welcome to check out any or all of these videos that I tell you about, and I'll probably include a link somewhere. This is a classic of Latin American literature by the Colombian author José Eustacio Rivera. I really would like to tell you about this novel, La Vorágine. It has been translated into English. It just turned 100 years old last year. It was translated as The Vortex. So I still need to read it. So when I do, I will definitely share my thoughts with you. I have La Ruta de Don Quixote by Azorín. It's a meditation, one of many, in Spanish literature, about Cervantes' great work. And here, this really old collection of short stories by Guy de Maupassant. Many of them right here. You can see the contents, many stories. As you know, most of them are quite short, quite brief. The type and the font are not reader friendly, I would say, but they really packed this book full of some of the most famous short stories by Maupassant. And this whole thing, almost, most of this part consists of books by Cortázar. So that's why I was saying, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this. I have the winners, 62 model kits, so most of the novels, Manual for Manual, Divertimento, a Final Exam, and the Diary of Andrés Fava. So I've shown you these in the video that I did on Cortázar, so we're just gonna leave that here. These are really heavy, these editions. And then for some weird reason, I have a couple of Beckett books right here. Most of my Beckett, also for some weird reason, is in boxes at storage. So I really need to do something about that. I think at one point I had read all of the books that I had by him. And by the way, there's only one book by Beckett that I have not read, and that is Disjecta. So that little volume that brings together his essays and some other stuff that didn't fit anywhere else, So that's the only book by him that I don't have and that I have not read. I'm really a huge Beckett fan, though he has also infuriated me quite a bit, especially with that volume of the complete short prose. But I have here More Bricks Than Kicks and Krapp's Last Tape and other dramatic pieces. So I'm gonna go and retrieve one of these days those other volumes of Beckett, and definitely will tell you more about him in a video. I'm still thinking, which one I'm gonna talk about. This that you see here, let's move a little bit, is a collection of plays by Stephen Adly Gurgis. The thing is, the only reason why I have this is I was taking a course in college about plays, about theater, and we would read the plays. In this case, we read Our Lady of 121st Street, which is quite hilarious, to be honest with you. We talked about the play, and then we actually went and watched the play. The professor was in fact an actor, and he chose plays that he was in, and then we would go see the play and discuss the whole experience, of reading and also of having seen and heard the play. So it was really a very interesting, one of the most interesting courses that I have ever taken. And the same goes for Proof. Okay, that's the main reason why I have this play. It just happened to be something that I read. I really enjoyed this one. This one got the Pulitzer Prize, and it's really good. There's a good film about it too. So really, really good stuff. But again, you know, if I had not had taken a course, I may not have had a copy of this in the first place. I have a couple of plays here by Lope de Vega, so La Dama Boba and La Moza de Cántaro. This came in a collection. I got this, it was a used book that I bought one of the many times that I went back to Buenos Aires. Unfortunately, I still haven't read it, so I'm gonna do something about that one of these days, because Lope de Vega, you know, is huge, and unfortunately I've only read a couple of plays by him. Fuente Ovejuna, of course, and I believe the other one was El Castigo sin Venganza, and that's about it, you know. So I do need to do something about that. Then let me see here. I have a couple of books here that I also want to keep as a kind of a surprise. You know, I like to cultivate that that sense of mystery. You know, let me make sure that that's exactly what I don't want it to happen. Okay, there. So I have this one by Cortázar that you've seen before, Prose of the Observatory, and then I have a couple here that, as I said, you know, behind this one. One of them is going to be for the Borges connection, so please be on the lookout for that. I think you will enjoy it. And the other one is an urban novel that I really think that, you know, I do want to tell you about. So, you know, be on the lookout for that. And once again, I'll let you know when I get to those books. I have La Resistencia, one of the last books that were published by Sabato. This is unfortunately not available in English, not that I know of. Meditation, you know, on basically life towards the end of the 20th century, packed with insight, you know, just very well done. Sabato's idea was always, you know, how can we live our lives in a human way, you know, without being, you know, destroyed by technology and all that stuff. So this is a classic. I remember when this came out, and it was a huge thing. And then also after that he published Antes del Fin, so Before the End, right? His another book of memoirs. I think La Resistencia would also be considered a memoir. So very brief books, as you can see, these two. Okay, so not very lengthy or anything, but once again, you know, they're just full of insight. And then Cortázar's Fantomas contra los Vampiros Multinacionales. I have also shown you this in that video that I did on Cortázar. So I'm gonna once again move a little bit to the other side so that I can navigate this thing. I have a tripod here with the camera and everything, and it's a little bit difficult to move in this place where this bookshelf happens to be. Plus, I'm finding it difficult to move, period, these days. That's one of the reasons why I am not doing the videos in the usual place that I used to do it. I used to sit on the floor. And I mentioned in one of the other videos that I did that last semester, so the second half of last year, I was quite ill. I may tell you a little bit more about that in the future, just in case anybody wants to hear about that kind of thing. But yeah, I was quite ill, and one of the results is that I have really quite a bit of trouble just, you know, sitting on the floor, and the posture that I have is, you know, I have to be careful with that. Otherwise my back and my neck suffer, and we don't want that, right? So The Trolley by Claude Simon. I really love Claude Simon. I read this one out of order, so I'm kind of reading him as I go in the order that he published the novels, and this is the last one. It's a novella, really, you know, it's like really brief. So I enjoyed it. It's really good. Then this is Ariel by José Rodó from Uruguay. It's a classic of you know, South American literature. He looks at the relationship between the Hispanic America and the US, you know. So many things about this book people like to criticize, you know, of his approach, but you know, you can imagine this was published, let me see, in 1910, so there are a lot of things that are quite dated according to some critics, but it's still you know, a really important book in the history of art literature. I have a novella, short novel, as most of the ones by François Mauriac tend to be. Let me see if I can find well, I think the title was simply, yeah, it's Le Mal. Okay, so I don't remember what the translation was in English. It's definitely available in English. I'll look it up and I'll let you know. You know, I'll put it just somewhere here or whatever so that you can see that. Roberto Arlt, of course, Los Lanzallamas, the Flamethrowers, is that how it was translated into English? the second part of the Seven Madmen. Okay, if you read the Seven Madmen, it's incomplete, so you need this second part. This is available in English too. I think they published a 1-volume version that includes both, so you get the whole story right there. All of these are by a publisher named Losada, by the way. That's why they all look very similar. This is my favorite play, believe it or not. Unfortunately, it doesn't get a lot of attention in English. I think it's available in English, but it's probably out of print. We read it in school. This was a used copy that I bought back then. I also had the chance to go and see it performed, because in the class we also did that. You know, we read the play and then we went to a theater, El Teatro Colonial in Buenos Aires. And after the performance, we actually had the chance to ask the actors questions. You know, we had a Q&A with them. And I have somewhere, I don't know where, but I have one of those little cassettes with those little recorders with the questions and the answers. So I think that is amazing. One day I'm going to find that and I'm going to listen to it and I'm just going to cry, okay, because that's what happens to me. And I wonder where those people are right now. You know, it's that kind of thing. I always do that. I don't know. I'm that kind of person who likes to think about stuff like that. But I have very fond memories of that. I can still remember, like, vividly, you know, the journey to the theater, like in a bus all together, you know, the whole class talking about, you know, so many different things. And I still remember that as if it had happened yesterday. But it was a very long time ago. And then, of course, you have seen my copy of Nausea by Jean-Paul Sartre. That I have done a video on that you're of course welcome to check out. I also bought this in Buenos Aires. I bought it at that amazing bookstore that is one of the most famous in the world, El Ateneo Gran Splendid. It's considered to be like the second most beautiful bookstore in the world or something like that. It usually comes up in those lists. And here I have more books that you have seen before, so we'll just kind of, you know, go over these real quick. Último Round and Around the Day in 80 Worlds by Cortázar. So different covers, but kind of, you know, similar type of thing right here. Those miscellaneous type of books by Cortázar that I have shown you before in that other video. This is God Speaks to His Children. It's a kind of, it has biblical texts, so it's an abbreviated Bible, I guess you would say, with simplified stories for young readers. You know, it has some images and everything, you know, different things from both the what we Christians call the Old Testament and the New Testament. You have the, you know, for example, I have a poem there by Mother Teresa as a bookmark, Job, you know, and it goes all the way to the new part. The point here was to get, you know, young readers to read the Bible, and this was in fact one of the reasons why I treasure this book. One of the many reasons is that this was a present when I received the First Communion, so I have that since that time. Horacio Quiroga, Cuentos de Amor, de Locura y de Muerte, so tales of love, madness and death. I do want to tell you about Horacio Quiroga because he is just a classic in Latin America. It doesn't get a lot of attention in English, but I'm going to reread this one of these days and I'll definitely tell you about it because he has been really one of the most influential authors in my life. I've also shown you guys the Invention of Morel, my copy of that, when I did the video Author Spotlight on Adolfo Bioy Casares. I have here a copy of Aura by Carlos Fuentes, the great novella, and this was a present or a gift from one of my professors after I had taken a couple of classes with him. This is good old, you've probably, you know, heard of this or seen the movie. The movie is quite good too. This is good old Marat Sade. Okay, and the title is right there, one of the longest titles for a play, I believe, by Petar Weiss. So really good play. I wanted to read it. You know, I watched the movie and I thought it was great. And I have some more Cortázar right here. I believe all of this is Cortázar also, so you can definitely look at that in the camera is kind of focusing. Okay, you can definitely look at this in the video that I did on Cortázar. These are the other books by Cortázar, you know, like the Autonauts of the Cosmo Route, the poems and the plays, basically. And then this book that he did in collaboration with Julio Silva on Silvalandia with this whole art, you know, and drawings and all that stuff. So really, really cool stuff. You can see it in that other video that I did. Let me just move a little bit more so that we can see that final part that stays right there in the corner. So I have This copy of The Art of Fiction by John Gardner. As you know, John Gardner, the author of Beowulf, Beowulf, come on, Grendel, okay? It's yesterday was the last day of class, and this was a really, really tough and really rewarding too school year. So I'm here like almost, I'm really looking forward, to kind of using this summer to recover and also to share with you guys some more videos, because I didn't get the chance to do many of those when I was going through those illnesses and all that stuff. So anyway, John Gardner's advice and notes on the craft for young writers, really good. Okay, good thing about this one is, as I read it, I was like, okay, I know this. It sounds like common sense to me. So I was like, well, I'm not, I'm not that lost really when it comes to writing fiction, but it's good to have that reminder, sometimes. That's the kind of person that I am. Theoretically, I know some things, but sometimes I need to be reminded of them, especially when it comes to writing, and very, very especially when it comes to like the spiritual life. This is also by Losada, the publisher in Spanish that I was showing you before, but it's kind of like a nicer edition, even though it's really, really old. I bought this in Buenos Aires, one of the times that I went there. So let me show you the cover right there. This is El Conde Lucanor. So El Conde Lucanor, also known as the Book of Patronio, or Count Lucanor, this is the Spanish collection of tales. In English you have the Canterbury Tales, then there's the Decameron in Italy, etc., etc. In Spanish we have this one. So that is something else that I wanted to talk to you about. Hopefully as I continue to do my series on Spanish literature, because I believe Spanish literature deserves a lot more attention than it gets. I have this really old book of poems by Maurice Maeterlinck. It's really old, yes, as you can see. Let me see if I can find the publishing date here. Sometimes books are so old that they don't even include the date of publication. And I believe this maybe, oh, okay. So it says first published in 1915. So we know that it's at least from that time. And it just includes kind of a selection of poems by him. I wanted to read his poetry after I had read a couple of his plays and other books. I read his book on death, for example. It's really, really interesting. I really enjoyed that reading experience. And then just like the one that I showed you before on Maupassant, this one is The Place of Chekhov. Okay, so this comes from, let me see, The Place of Chekhov. Okay, I believe it includes all of them. Let me see. Judging by the title, you would think it should, right? So, yeah, so the basic ones, like The Seagull, The Cherry Orchard, Three Sisters, Uncle Vanya, The Anniversary, On the High Road, The Wedding, On the Harmfulness of Tobacco, and The Bear. So yeah, it's all here in, once again, very, very small font, so you have to deal with that. And then at the very, very corner right here, I have this novel by William Golding, Darkness Visible. Okay, so I read this a very long time ago. I remember, enjoying it, but I think this is about twins. I think it's, yes, so it includes this element of twins. So if you're interested in that, in literature or in film, twins, right now I'm thinking of that movie by David Cronenberg. Dead Ringers, I believe it was also about twins. I get confused sometimes with twins, doppelgangers, but you get the point, right? I'm interested in that kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, if you want to read something different by Golding, something other than Lord of the Flies, and the typical ones are maybe The Inheritors that gets read a little bit more, I would say Darkness Visible. That blue collection of the Nobel Prize that I showed you before, they chose, of course, one book by every winner of the Nobel Prize, or a collection, And for Golding, they did not choose Lord of the Flies, but they went with Darkness Visible. So I think that says a little bit about this novel. It was not really my favorite by him, but I'm also thinking about Golding and which one I'm going to share my ideas with you on. So that's another thing that I'm planning to do. But anyway, that was the third part of this ongoing tour through my bookshelf. I took it quite literally. I show you one shelf, and hopefully, okay, I kind of want to promise this, it's not going to take me 2 years again to share with you the next one. Okay, so yeah, I mean, I apologize for that because it's been quite a while. Last year I didn't even do one, so hopefully it won't be that way. Thank you so much for your patience. I hope you enjoyed this, and we're going to continue. So, just stay tuned, and also for some ideas on some of these books that I have just shown you. So, thank you so much for stopping by, and have a wonderful day.